Uh, Jennifer, good morning. Homegirl.
Good
Miranda, homegirl.
morning.
Nia, good morning. Dick, good
Good
morning.
morning.
All right. I don't know if you guys were on the call. Just we're gonna go over some asset classes today. So it's basically like a what is commercial real estate 101 type of overview. If you guys have any questions, feel free to throw it into the chat, and we're gonna go ahead and get started. Y'all can see my screen. All right. So just to start off, what is commercial real estate? I know we have the definition for transactions, but what actually defines a commercial real estate property is a property that has the potential to generate profit, rental income, capital gain, properties like office buildings, duplexes, restaurants, warehouses. And we're going to cover the different types of asset classes because depending on the type of asset class that you are dealing with, there are certain things that you need to look out for and certain things that are not as relevant as other asset classes. So we'll dive right into that. Okay. So the first type of asset class I'm going to talk about is office building space. I've been working a lot with office spaces. I don't know about you guys, but I've seen occupancy into offices or the desire to get into offices has started to grow recently. And there's a lot of businesses that are coming in that want to buy office space. And so it's a really good niche to be able to understand what exactly what type of offices do we work with because it's going to change the way that you're going to look for these types of properties. So when you have a client that's looking for an office space, the first question you need to ask, and this is going to be a common question with any client, are you looking to buy or are you looking to lease? Right? It immediately sets them aside for the type of transaction that you're going to be dealing with. The next question you're going to want to ask is what size of office space are you looking for? And a lot of the time, they don't know exactly how much office space they need. And it's going to be hard for them to tell you how much square footage they need. What they will be able to tell you, though, is how many people will be occupying that office. So, based off of how many people will occupy the office, you can kind of get a measure of how big of an office you're going to need to look for, right? Another question you need to ask is not just how many people occupy, but will there be times where you're going to have events that more people might attend versus your regular day-to-day, um, uh, occupancy? Do you need walk-by traffic or are most of your services by appointment? So this is a really important one because sometimes you'll find office spaces hidden in office parks. A good example is the office park that's right behind the Fashion Square Mall, right? It does not have the frontage on Colonial, but it's a huge complex of thousands of office spaces. And a lot of those businesses do not require walk by traffic. It's not like retail where they rely on the walk by traffic to get the business. A lot of these businesses are service based businesses, taxes, accounting, insurance, real estate, um, just tech companies that don't even meet with clients. So a lot of these businesses that are looking for offices don't necessarily need frontage on a main road. It's okay to look for office spaces that are a little bit behind, a little bit hidden because they don't need the walk-by traffic. What is your preferred location or area? Sometimes businesses want to be around like businesses. A good example of a client that I'm working with right now is a tech company. They want to be surrounded by other technology based companies. They want to be surrounded by other professional businesses. So an office park for them is perfect versus maybe a real estate company that doesn't necessarily need to have frontage, but they might still want to have some sort of visibility. How many employees will be using the space? So this goes back to the size and the needs of the square footage for the office space. How many employees do you have? Are you looking to grow or expand? And that's a big one, especially if they're looking to buy. Then, they might start off with 1,500 square feet, but they're projecting to grow their business and might want to have the ability to expand into a larger area. So would it make sense for them to purchase a larger building and sublease while they're growing into the space? Or are they okay with leasing a smaller space and then maybe in a year or two they're ready to purchase, right? I know Daniel's working with someone just like that. I know I'm working with someone that's looking to buy and they want to buy a larger office and they're willing to sublease those spaces in order to have the ability or that flexibility to grow into those spaces as needed. And then are there any specific amenities or features that they require? This is actually a very important question when it comes to office space. How many of you are familiar with what a full service office is? Just raise your hand or click the little button or just say yes, you're familiar. Okay, a full service office space is much, much different from just a regular office space that you're finding. A full service office space is a office space that offers you a lobby, usually. It offers you all utilities and Wi-Fi included. There's usually a conference room that is common use, meaning it's not your conference room, but you can book it if you need it. And an example is downtown offices, right? You walk in, there's a huge directory of offices. You have a lobby. You might even have a little coffee shop on the first floor. And so usually what full service means is you're going to pay the rent. It's usually just a base rent, but it includes all the services of the lobby, the Wi-Fi, the utilities, and everything is included within that rent. Okay, some companies love that. That's exactly what they're looking for. They want to have that luxury feel of walking in, having a directory, being able to talk to a customer service person in the lobby, and just having those amenities, like walking into a nice condo building downtown, right? For their clients to come in and feel like they're in a nice location, a nice place. It's a full service. Okay, that's much different from finding an office that is not full service that's going to include a triple net most likely. Okay, so when you ask them what specific amenities are you looking for, that's kind of what you're looking out for. Are you looking for a full service office, or are you looking for maybe just a standalone office where you just run your business? Okay, any questions on office space? All right, moving on. The next asset class we have is retail. This is probably the most popular one that we have worked, okay? As usual, you have a client that wants retail space. Are you looking to buy or lease? A lot of times they think they want to lease, but maybe they don't know that they can buy and they prefer to buy. So when you ask that question, you're opening up that conversation. Very important to know what type of retail business they're planning to operate. And there's a few reasons why it's important to know what type of retail. One, you're going to want to put them in a place or a location or strip center or plaza that has other tenants that would feed into that business. For example, you see a TJ Maxx, with TJ Maxx, you always see a Ross, you see a Marshalls, you see a shoe store, you see a PetSmart. So would it make sense to put a automotive location in there? Could you even put an automotive location in that retail center? You can't, right? So it's important to understand, and automotive is considered retail, by the way. But it's important to understand the type of business that they're running because it's going to dictate where you look for these locations, right? As well as the type of foot traffic that they need or would like to have. A nail salon, for example, loves to be in Publix plazas. Why? Because they love to capture all the walk-through traffic that goes to Publix. Once they leave, they capture all of that. That's why you always see a nail salon in the Publix plaza. We see a nail salon in all the big box plazas, to be honest with you. Okay. What is your target customer demographic? Okay, so this is one, you have to be very careful not to violate any laws when you're asking these questions. But a lot of times customers will just flat out tell you, I want a specific type of demographic. Okay. Are they looking for high salaries? Dr. Phillips area, maybe, Winter Park area? Are they looking for high income? Are they looking for areas that are dense in residential? Gyms, for example, would love to be in an area that's very heavily dense in residential. Are they a restaurant that's targeting higher end clientele, or are they looking for more that mid-range salary type of clientele, right? Are they a quick serve restaurant, or are they a high-end sit down and eat restaurant? Do you have any specific requirements for foot traffic or visibility? Um, a lot of times the client will know exactly how much foot traffic they want for their business to thrive. I have a coffee shop client that says anything less than 50,000 cars a day, or anything less than 45,000 cars a day. I'm not going to look at it because I need heavy traffic in order to be able to drive that business into this concept, because it's a newer concept. He wants more traffic to be able to attract more clientele. And very important to know, are you looking for a standalone property, or do you want to be in a shopping plaza? As I mentioned, nail salons, barber shops, they all love to be in strip plazas because they feed off of that foot traffic that goes into those plazas. But some retail places like automotive, tire shops, um, gosh, larger furniture companies, they can actually get into a standalone, maybe a restaurant, rather have a standalone restaurant versus being in a plaza because of their concept and because they have a recognizable name, and they can actually afford to be in a standalone building. So it's important to know whether they want to be in a strip center or they want to be in a standalone property, because that's obviously going to change the availability of inventory and the type of properties that you're going to be looking out for them. Okay. Any questions on retail? All right. The next asset class is hospitality. This is something that is very interesting. It can get a little complex when you're dealing with hospitality. Most of the time, it's going to be a purchase. I don't think I've ever dealt with a client that says that they want to lease out a hotel, nor do I ever remember seeing a hotel for lease. Okay, so whenever somebody says they want to buy into hospitality, they're purchasing. They're coming in. They have something in mind. What type of hospitality business are you looking for? Are you looking for a hotel, a resort, a boutique motel? This is very important because when you're talking hotels, we start going into this world of flags. Okay. I'm talking Hilton, Best Western, Days Inn. All of these hotels or motels have flags and have very specific requirements. So if your person is looking to purchase a hotel and they have experience buying hotels, they more than likely know whether they want a specific flag or if they want to go into more of a boutique concept where they can bring their own name and their own brand name into it. And if they're looking for a flag, then there's very specific requirements that you need to know about that flag so that you're not sending them properties that are just not going to work. And I'll give you an example. Um, a a Hampton Inn or a Hilton will not purchase a hotel that has an exterior corridor. Does anyone know what an exterior corridor is? Okay. Have you seen those motels where you have the outside walking space and you can walk outside and go from one room to the next? Okay. So if your hotel buyer is looking for a specific flag, there's a lot of hotel brands that do not want to have an exterior corridor. So if you're sending them these motels that have these exterior corridors, they're just going to keep rejecting those properties. Okay. And you're going to be wasting your time. What is your target market? Are you looking for business travelers or vacationers? This is a huge, huge difference, right? You're talking either you're going to be in International Drive, Disney, or you're going to be in Maitland because you're coming to all the business expos, or you're going to be close to the convention center because you're going to be drawing in all these business professionals. What amenities are essential for your guests? Do you require a pool? Do you require a gym? You require a kitchen so that you can serve breakfast in the morning. These are all amenities that are going to tack on to the price point of a hotel because even if they do have a pool or they do have a gym, has it been maintained? Is that a capital improvement that they would have to pay out of pocket in order to get it up to date? And a lot of hotels, motels do not have all these amenities. So you got to find the ones that have the amenities or at least have the room to build out the amenities that they're looking for. A big one is in-house laundry. Okay. And is the equipment up to date? Because that's very expensive equipment and there's a huge turn on bed sheets and towels in hotels. Okay. And a lot of times, if you have to send that externally, that's a huge expense and it's not a quick turnaround for the hotel operation. So they're going to reject it. Okay. They want in-house laundry. And are you looking for properties with existing operations or development opportunities? There's a lot of motels that are basically running a weekly special because they're run down. They're no longer an operating flagged hotel. And a lot of hotel buyers like to purchase into that because there's a lot of upside to it. Okay. Other hoteliers like to have something that's operating already, something that already has a really good average daily rate and has the flag requirements already met so that they can just buy into it and start generating income immediately. Okay. Any questions on hospitality?
Yes, I have a question in regards to the hotel. So for something like Hampton Inn, are those not franchised buy-ins? You, I just am wanting to understand if a person was interested, say, in purchasing a house.
Well,
How do you
that's the flag is the franchise, right?
Okay,
You buy a property, and the way that you buy into the franchise typically is you buy the hotel, and then you apply to get the flag for
okay,
Hampton Inn or for Best Western or for Days Inn, and each flag hotel is going to have specific requirements that the buyer needs to meet on their property. Okay, so the hotelier can have the property and then apply for the franchise or the flag in this case.
okay,
Okay, so that's what I mean by if you don't have an in-house laundry, if you don't have a breakfast area to serve breakfast, if your hotel has the outside walking areas that you can walk from one room to the other on the outside of it, Hampton Inn or Best Western is just, they're not going to accept it. Okay, Best Western had went through a full rebranding and is no longer doing the exterior corridors, for example, right?
yeah,
So yeah, when I say flag, it's technically what I mean is it's a franchise. They're buying
okay,
into the flag, and because obviously buying into the flag gives them benefits, right? It gives them the brand recognition, it gives them the sales and operating system support, right? And we could get into systems with hotels and dive into average daily rates, star reports, and everything, but that's just a whole nother class that we could do is just diving into hotels and how to purchase hotels.
flag and franchise. Okay, I got it.
Yep.
Thanks.
Does anyone recognize this hotel, by the way? I sold this hotel probably like 10 years ago, right off of Lee Road. So a funny story about hotels. So this is now a I think they're converting it to like a veteran housing project. But when we approached them, they were having weekly rates. And so a big red flag on hotels is if they're offering like daily or weekly rates on weekly rates on people that are coming in, that's a hotel that's going down in their operations because they have to now open it up for these clientele that needs to stay there for a week or 2 weeks at a time. And so it had a lot of things that needed to be brought up to par. It had the laundry, in-house laundry, it had the pool, it had the kitchen, but none of it was operational. And so when you go in and you do a walkthrough on a hotel, you have to go floor by floor. And there was a couple of floors that were just, they were not using those floors. There was mold. it was it was a really bad situation. It looked great from the outside. You drove by, it looks like a great hotel. As soon as you start going floor by floor, you start realizing that there's a lot of money that has not been put into the places that they needed to put the money into. And so that price point that that owner was looking for kept going down as we started tacking out, adding up all those capital improvements that were needed on the hotel. So very complex process to sell or to buy a hotel, but would be a good class for us to do, to dive into. Industrial. I love industrial. Whether it's buying or leasing, it can be a really great deal depending on how big the warehouse is. So as usual, if you have a client that's looking for warehouse space, are you looking to buy or are you looking to lease? It's very important to understand the nature of the operation because warehouses do have different types of operations, whether it's manufacturing, food processing, storage and distribution, the logistics. So depending on the type of operation is going to tell you the type of warehouse that you need. And these types of warehouses are clustered in different areas. Okay. So I'll give you an example. If your client owns restaurants and they need to process food, okay, that immediately tells you that you're going to need some sort of refrigeration, either freezers, coolers, because if they're processing food, they need to store that food and they're not going to be storing that food unless it's frozen. Okay. So in this area, I don't see very many refrigerated warehouses that come up for lease or for sale. So you immediately got to understand that that's very limited inventory. And it's going to be a lot more expensive than your typical warehouse because it includes the refrigeration. Now, can you find a warehouse where the client is willing to install the refrigeration? Yes, but you need to find out if it's allowed, right? Because maybe the landlord just does not want refrigeration built into the warehouse. So it's very important to understand the type of operation. Are you manufacturing something? And do you use specific types of chemicals that maybe your neighbors in that warehouse space might not approve of? Okay. You have the proper drainage fields built into the warehouse to be able to support that type of manufacturing. There are warehouses that have been doing it for a long time. So you look for those warehouses versus trying to find a warehouse where they're going to have to build that in and get the approval. So again, very important to understand the nature of the operations. The operations that I enjoy the most is storage and distribution, logistics. These are the people that will come in that need 10,000, 15,000 square feet. They need high ceilings, and all they do is they set up the rack systems in the warehouse and they store products, and the trucks come in daily and they haul the products in and out all day. Those are incredible deals when it comes to leases and also purchases because they will sign 10 years and they are looking for high square footage. So if you're looking to be an expert in warehousing, storage and distribution is money. That's where you get the big warehouses and you sign those 10-year deals that can amount to $1, $2, $3 million deals. So what are the space requirements in terms of square footage and ceiling height? So square footage is one thing, right? What are you storing in this warehouse? Ceiling height is important in warehouses because of what I just said. If you have a 10,000 square foot warehouse and the ceiling height is 15 feet, you can only build those rack systems up to that 15-foot ceiling. Now, if you had the same 10,000 square foot warehouse and you had a 20-foot ceiling or a 25-foot ceiling, you could potentially stack twice as much product in a 10,000 square foot warehouse than you would if you had a low bearing ceiling in a warehouse. Does that make sense? So when you're dealing with warehouse or industrial clients, always don't just ask about the square footage, ask about the ceiling height too. Because if they're going to be storing products, the higher the ceiling, the higher the racks are going to be built and the more product they can actually store in those warehouses. So very important to just be looking at it from a cubic perspective, not just square footage, but also ceiling height. Okay. You need proximity to transportation hubs or major highways. The good thing is that most warehouses, when you look on Crexi or LoopNet and you find these warehouses, they're usually already built close to I-4, 75, major highways, just because it makes sense to build industrial warehouses in those areas. Sometimes warehouses are way off, right? But it's important to know if they need to have access to these roads because, again, for the logistics, right? If they're doing the distribution, they're going to want to have easy access to I-4. The quicker they can get in and the quicker they can get out onto the highway, the quicker they're going to be able to get that product to the next city or to the next state, and the quicker that they're going to be able to reload and continue their operations. So it just makes their operations a lot more efficient if you can get them closer to major highways that would allow them to do that. And then are there any specialized features, utilities that are required? So this is also very important. There's different types of doors in warehouses. There's the roll-up doors. There's the dock high doors. Dock high means those big semi trucks can back up and they're probably about, I don't know, 15 feet up, 10, 15 feet up, and they can just back into the door and they can load in the product and then they can drive off. Okay. A semi truck would not be able to do that if you have a roll up door, right? They would need to have a ramp and then they would need to pull the product up a ramp in order to be able to load the truck, and that just doesn't make sense for efficiency, right? So it's important to ask the question, what kind of doors do you need? You need loading docks, you need roll-up doors. Are you loading product or bringing in product with a van, with a pickup truck, or with a 50 footer, right? Um, if they tell you that they have 50 footers, the biggest thing that you're going to look at is not just the loading docks, but the space that they have to do a turnaround with those trucks. Okay. I've actually had clients where they have the loading docks, so it's great for them to come in and out, but those loading docks were made for the 25 footer, not the 50 footer. So if the 50 footer were to come into this warehouse, they would not have had the room to do a turnaround to get out of the warehouse space. Okay, so not just doors, but space. Uh, do they have the turnaround? Do they have truck parking? Because sometimes they need to leave a truck overnight. So there's a lot of things that you need to look at when you're dealing with the type of customer that needs this warehouse. And a lot of it is, do they have the room to just run their operations efficiently? So you need to ask, how big are the trucks? Because if they don't have a truck bay or a turnaround or turnabout to be able to do the exit properly, that warehouse is not going to work for them. And they're not going to limit their distribution to 25 footers just because they don't have the space. They'd rather find another warehouse that has the space. Does that make sense? Okay. Another thing is power. Phase two and phase three, different equipment that is used in warehouses will require different loads of power. More than likely, they're going to want to have a phase three power grid. Why? Because a lot of these forklifts, a lot of these loading equipment that they install into the warehouse requires a lot more power than a phase two can provide. So you might find a warehouse that has everything perfect, but it only has a phase two power grid, and that's not going to be sufficient for the equipment that they need to be able to run their operations. So always ask about their power requirements. Another thing that's not on here is, do they need air conditioning? Sometimes the products, even though they don't need refrigeration, they still don't want to have a lot of heat and moisture in the warehouse, or sometimes they have employees that are working in the warehouse consistently throughout the day and they don't want them to overheat. So is it an air conditioned warehouse, or do they need an air conditioned warehouse? That's an important one. Okay. Any questions on industrial? All right, moving on. Multifamily, typically a purchase, right? I know a few of you have actually worked with clients that are looking for multifamily. So one of the first things you need to ask is, what size of apartment units are you interested in? And how many units are you interested in? Sometimes they're just looking for six, eight, 10 units, you know, and usually those are the ones that you're dealing with. Sometimes they're looking for larger complexes, 120, 150 units. And it's very important to understand not just that there are 120 units or that there are 8 units, but it's also important to understand how many bedrooms each unit has. Okay. The reason that this is important is let's say you have an 8 unit complex and they're all studio apartments. And then you have another 8 unit complex that is a mixture of 2 bedroom and 3 bedroom units. Which one do you think is going to have a better rent roll? Right? The 2 bedroom and 3 bedroom units because those are more rentable and they're gonna ask for a higher rent. So you're gonna have a better income if you have a better mix of 2 bedroom, 3 bedroom units versus a multifamily that just has studio apartments or 1 bedroom units. If those are just not as rentable as the 2 bedroom and 3 bedroom units. Okay. What amenities are important to you? Sometimes they don't care if it has a pool or a park. Those are usually the ones that are looking for the larger multifamily complexes, 120 units plus. If you have a multifamily investor that only wants to get something that's 6, 8 units, 10 units, they don't care if there's a dog park. They don't care if there's a gym or a pool. They just want the units and they want the rental income. They're not really concerned about the amenities. So it's important to ask them if that's something that is important to them so that you can actually look for something that meets their criteria. Are you interested in properties with existing tenants or ones that need leasing up? So this is an important one because there's different types of multifamily investors. There's the ones that want to come in and just immediately get that rental income and not worry about it, sit back and relax. And then there's the ones that like to actually put work into the property to be able to bring the rent up a little bit. So it's very important to understand whether they're looking for fixer-uppers or add that value add apartment complexes or multifamily properties, or they're looking for turnkey. Okay. When you're looking for that value add, it's okay to have vacancies. It's okay to have leases that are about to expire because it gives them the flexibility to either renew a lease at a higher rental rate or get those tenants out, remodel the units, and then rent it out for a higher price point. So not only do you need to know whether they want to have existing tenants, but along with that, you now know that you're going to have to ask for what the rent roll is, and you're going to ask for that rent roll because you want to know whether they will be able to bring it up quickly or they have to wait for that lease to expire. The good thing about multifamily that's different from commercial leases is that usually it's never going to be more than a year. And a lot of time, these upside properties are renting out to tenants month to month. So there's a good chance that there's a good upside potential and it's a quick turnaround. What are your target rental incomes and occupancy rates? What kind of money are you looking to make? Everybody has a different number in their mind as to what a good income is. Some investors are okay making 100,000 a year in rental income. Others are okay making 60,000 a year in rental income. I have a client that as long as he's making 50 to 60,000 net, he's happy. Okay. And also, if they're looking for $150,000 a month or a year in rental income, but they only have a $800,000 budget, that's just not,
Oh, yang
you know what I'm saying, right? So, so that's not gonna work. So you have to ask these questions not only
Oh,
not
yang
only so that you know what kind of property you're looking for, but also to understand whether their budget matches their expectations. The last thing you want to do is waste your time sending all these properties that have decent returns, but it's just not what they think they're going to be able to get in multifamily. The good thing is that multifamily actually has properties that have really good returns, and I've seen 10 to 12% returns in different areas like Lakeland and Tampa, St. Pete. So if they're looking for a high end return above 10%, multifamily is probably going to be the asset class that's going to get it to you. Okay. What is your budget? Again, this kind of ties in with the rental income and the return that they're looking for, right? If they tell you that they have an $800,000 budget, but they want over six figures in a net return for rental income, you need to educate them and explain to them that, if they're looking for this much, probably going to cost you upwards of a million, million and a half to be able to get that 100,000 plus rental income. Any questions on multifamily? All right, moving on. Land. All right. So, yes, you can lease land. You will not be leasing land if you're going to develop it, though. Okay. Land is very, very flexible in its uses, and land can come in any type of zoning, to be honest with you. So if you have land that's residential and they're looking to develop multifamily, more than likely it's going to be a purchase, right? But let's say that your client has a trucking company and they're looking for land because they want to be able to build out a truck parking business, right? So then you're going to need to look for industrial land. Okay. Let's say that your client has an automotive shop and they want to build out an automotive shop. You're going to be looking for C3 land or maybe industrial one land. So depending on the type of land, it makes sense for them to either buy or lease in this case. But always want to know what they're looking to do. The intended use, again, it can come in residential, it can come in commercial. Are they looking to build out a retail strip center? You're going to need to have commercial land, C1, C2, C3, depending on the type of commercial that they're going to be building on that land. The difference between C1, which is general commercial, light commercial, that's retail strip center, right? C2, C3, you're getting more into heavier retail, like tire shops, like oil change centers, like automotive, like dealerships. That's more C2, C3 arenas. And when you get into industrial, you're talking about truck parking. You're talking about salvage yards. You're talking about just equipment parking lots, right? So depending on the use, is going to be a different zoning. You guys have that Muni code that I sent you guys, right? And that's also in the school platform. That's going to help you understand if they say, I want to lease a property for this use, that grid, that table, that use table is really going to be helpful in understanding what type of zoning you need to use or look for, depending on the type of use that this client would have. Are there any environmental or zoning restrictions on the land? Okay, so I'll give you an example for you to understand why you would need to ask that question. I have a client or had a client that I was selling their property, and it was a general commercial property. It was a C1 property. And I was approached by a buyer that wanted to buy the property so that they could have a propane tank retail business, selling propane tanks, but also storing the propane tanks on site. The zoning wouldn't allow it. There was too many environmental restrictions on the land in order for them to be able to put their propane tanks on that land. So it wasn't going to make sense. If you have a C1 commercial property and you're looking to build a full body shop, environmental is going to be an issue for you and zoning is going to be an issue for you. Why? Because there's waste that comes from having an auto body shop. And there's different chemicals that leak from the vehicles and from the equipment that just would not be allowed. So you need to understand if there are any environmental or zoning restrictions on the land before you can present it to your client. Are they looking to build a multifamily? Are they looking to build 10 townhomes on this land? What utilities and infrastructure do you need near the land? Don't get caught up in this trap. If you have a client that's looking to develop residential properties, develop multifamily, develop townhomes, it is very important to research whether there's already utilities drawn to the land or whether there's utilities near there that could be drawn to the land. Otherwise, it's either not going to work or it's going to cost them way too much money to draw the utilities to the land to be able to develop and bring electric and water to that land for development. Does that make sense? Yes? Okay. And what is your timeline for development? Um, Depending on the timeline, you might need to find land that's already been leveled or that the trees have been cut down, or that already has a PUD in place or approvals in place so that they can start building quicker than not? Or are you just looking to buy the land and maybe develop when you're able to build your project and put things together, right? So it's very important for you to understand what timeline they have for development because that's also going to give you that flexibility on what kind of land you're going to present to them that you're going to be looking for. Any questions on land? All right. All right. That is all I have for you guys on asset classes. Do you guys have any questions on anything that we covered today? Y'all are quiet. It's
Sí,
Monday.
una pregunta, Mauricio.
Dime.
Los terrenos cuando están buscando para poner food truck,
Okay.
¿es la misma restricción que se debe mirar o hay algo más específico ahí?
Bueno, food trucks will typically have their own power, right? So that you don't need to have utilities drawn to the land. But what you do need to be careful about is the zoning and the allowable use for the food trucks. Okay. There's been a lot of areas in Central Florida that have restricted food trucks.
Mm,
Okay. So the first thing you need to do is call the city and say, do you allow food trucks, right? For like a food truck haul, right? Multiple food trucks in the place, you need to ask whether it's allowed because sometimes, even though the zoning is correct, the allowable use may be restricted by the city. So you would need to call the city and find out if it's allowed.
okay, thank
Oh, Mauricio, and since I own the food truck, that's something that I was researching too. At least in Osceola County and Orange County, in order for you to ask for the permits, it's a you have to sit on the board and actually plead your case, basically. Because if you do more than two food trucks, even if it's not considered a food truck park, anywhere that you place two food trucks or more, you have to have a special variance.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a very gray area. It's not like cut and dry. It's not black and white, right? It's something that you're gonna have to deal with the city with regardless. Like I said, with even if the zoning is there, you still need to prove your case. Like you said, go in front of the board and say, well, this is why this makes sense in this area. This is how it's gonna bring value to the area and it's just it's a process. You know, Daniel, you have to deal with it with your strawberry uh food truck.
The
So
food truck, yeah, it is so hard. It was so when you're trying to do the right thing, it was so hard to find a place to put the food truck because any owner can tell you, yeah, parking here, but then you see all these places shutting down because they've allowed more than one food truck at a time,
mhm.
and zoning the inspectors that will come in and they will just shut it down because they're not allowed.
And
So
even when you get the approvals, there will be times where other people from the city will come and complain, and they
yeah,
might come in and say, "You're done. You have to
yeah.
move."
Hmm.
So it's a very high risk business model. Um, which, as an agent, right, you have to really consider whether it's worth your time to go through all that trouble. I mean, if it's a big project, cool, of course, it makes sense, right? But if you're looking just for a small piece of land for maybe just one food truck or two, just be very careful that you get all the information from the city, that you explain to your client the approval process and the steps that they need to take to get the approval, especially if it's their first food truck, right? They they have two or three other food trucks. They know the process, right? But if it's their first, you got to really explain to them that it is a very complicated process.
Yeah, and for the food truck haul, unless you're working with like a la carte or people that already know what they're doing and they have connections, because these
Mhm.
people a la carte they have three buildings already, and they if they already know they have lawyers, they have
Yeah.
templates, they have a bunch of people. that can make the process super simple. All you have to do is just find them the land, and they'll
Yeah.
do the rezoning and they'll do the special variance. But if you don't, if your client doesn't know, and we don't know, then it's a mess.
It's a mess, yeah. Yeah. Thank you for that input. No, it's true. Food trucks is complicated. It's not the easiest process, but yeah. All right, y'all. Any other questions before we close this up?
Mauricio, actually, what do you think is one of those types of property, the one that is more active in the current market?
Well, I've been working with a lot of office space lately. I would say, gosh, restaurants keep me busy, warehouses keep me busy. Um, I'm closing 2 office spaces, medical office
So
spaces.
offices, restaurants, and industrial?
I would say restaurants, you see a second gen restaurant, that somebody's gonna pick that up fast. It doesn't last long on the market. I mean, I know Peter's working on a restaurant, I'm working on a restaurant, Roz is working on a restaurant. So it shows you, right? I mean, just by talking to the group, you'll see the restaurants, there's a need. There's a need for
Some are
restaurants.
closing and some are opening. So
Yeah.
second generation, okay, good.
Yep.
I know medical offices or
Medical
just offices?
offices in general. So I have an office space that I just closed for a title company, and one that I'm closing for medical. So office space, there's people that are reoccupying. And so office space will move. And I have a client that's buying an office space. They're a tech company from South America, and they're coming in, they're buying a big office space.
A
So
small, medium size, or big?
all sizes. This
All
tech
size.
company is looking for like a 9-10,000 square foot office.
Oh, big one, a big one. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. And I know Nia's got office space up there, right? All right. Anyways, so hey, y'all have a great week. I will be posting this in the school platform. If you have not joined the school platform, please do so that you can stay up to date with all the training. I will be available if you guys have any questions. Have a great day.
Good evening. Have a good day.
Bye.
Bye.